Let everybody know where we are in the stabilization of the system and all the other elements going on, along with year-end guidance and ongoing activities. So, I wanted to just, acknowledge, I mean, it's no surprise because I've been doing this for 6 months now, that we have had issues. And as noted, there always seem to be issues when you bring in a new system, and we just made it more complicated than anybody. But with the merger with UMD&J system. But this is a multi-year project, and finance is just the first piece of it. So this is the piece that we have to get as foundational and are making sure that everything is tied down and right before we, as groundwork, before we work on the other pieces. Subsequent ones being HR payroll being the next big piece, and then subsequently student information systems. That is, we haven't even picked that system yet because we're very deep in working on business processes there. But, why did we do it? Just as a reminder, well, we merged with another university. That's a big deal, and we all had to get onto one. This is a modern system, although we're pushing it to its edges, and that's a good thing because we're working with the vendors as well as our partners to make sure that it is as best as we can possibly make it. And then also to changing the way that we do business. We want the kind of feedback that we've been getting because that has contributed to discovery of items. You're talking about, what do we figure out is a monthly transaction load? 250,000 transactions a month that are going through this system. And so, it's only with a lot of eyes on it that we can find all the issues. And then once we find them, we have a very dedicated team, most of which are sitting over here right now, who have been diagnosing them and then working them through and then tying them back and then, as I mentioned, picking up, making sure that from a quality control standpoint, reports that we're going to be putting out are really tied down. So it is with that that, I do want to say thank you to everybody for your patience, but also thank you for your feedback, because the feedback, as I mentioned, has led to finding the issues that we have been dealing with and allowed us to arguably get to a stabilization faster than we would have otherwise. We still have a ways to go, and I'm going to talk about where we are with each of the modules and where we are with each of the remediation pieces. And then along the way, again, the reason I have this wonderful group over here is that within this group is an answer to virtually any question that you might have or discovery of what we need to do. So again, thank you for the patience, and we will get this to the point where it is stable and it is going to add value, but we're not there yet. So one area where we are virtually done is where we started with the biggest issue initially, which was procure to pay. There's no longer a backlog of invoices. They've been pushed through. We are in business as usual here, meaning the so-called backlog is the normal backlog of invoices that we get and run to pay. We have a small number of the emergency payments to still reconcile into the system. As you may recall, we made emergency payments to vendors when we couldn't get checks out of the system, and then reconciling those back in, making sure they're accounted for in the right way is the step we're in now, but that's a small number. What is important now is that we're getting to year end, and that means that people make a lot of orders and people get a lot of invoices. What I ask of all of you is that if you're talking with vendors or if you get invoices coming to you directly, ship them over to AP as soon as possible. What we don't want is to create another mountain there that has to be processed and have any difficulty when we get to year end of doing that. So if the invoices, again, we're instructing all vendors to send invoices to AP, they get processed there, you get pinged about them if they have an issue, but, or if they require approval. But if they don't get sent directly to AP, get them over to them as quickly as possible. There was a communication earlier about duplicate payments and what returning to business as usual for invoice processing means. We're actually at the stage now where the group is taking a step back and looking at coming out of crisis mode and saying, well, how should we adjust this to make it work as best as possible? And then to communicate out again to the community and say, this is how best to use procurement, how best to use their services, how best the customers should go. So just about everything is there. We're preparing for the year-end processes. There's going to be year-end guidance coming out very shortly, I think within the next week or so, in conjunction with the Controller's Office of how to deal with closing of June. And just ask you to take a look at that when that comes along. We're falling a bit behind on expense reports that require audit. That's not every expense report. It's above a certain level of dollar value and a certain percentage at random. And because of some personnel issues, we're falling a little bit behind on those. And we're working to both get some other resources in there to push that out and to shorten the cycle time. If you are a financial approver, just look at those things really carefully. The better they are coming to us, the faster those audits can take place and get them out. And that's, I think, a really important element. Don't think they might get caught over, through that part. That just holds things up. I will say that, the cycle times for expense reimbursements are a fraction of what they used to be. So what's that? Putting them in takes, well, yeah, typing out a form or whatever. We'll continue to work on that because I think there are some areas that could improve there, and we'll work with the vendors on that. So, any other things with procurement, my friends? Any questions about procurement? Yes?
You mentioned that pretty much...
Oh, yeah. Let's get the mic because we've got it going on the web.
So you mentioned that your, I guess, accounts payable is caught up with all the invoices that are coming in. What I'm still finding has of yesterday, were invoices that were submitted during the last quarter of last year that still have not been paid from the last quarter. I'm working with accounts payable, but I know that I've experienced, as many others, emails of invoices that have been submitted but fell into a batch of an unknown area that it's being addressed. But when you said that your accounts payable is caught up with these invoices, are you also referring to that backlog of areas where invoices were not processed initially? Or are you referring to the current ones?
So we had 3 batches of invoices. Those that got backlog that had good purchase orders. They had money in them, they were valid, and so on. Then we had a set that didn't have good purchase orders, and we had a third that was
POs that didn't convert.
Yeah.
And POs that, after they were either converted or even opened in the new system, closed or were canceled for various reasons.
Right.
And for both of those types of POs, if invoices came in against those POs, they couldn't be processed.
So bad POs from the conversion. Are these for older POs from prior to the go live?
Yeah.
These are new POs. Okay.
If you have any,
Just take the mic.
sorry. If you have any, you can send them directly to me. We have one person, actually 2 people dedicated for the ones that are still coming through on the older ones. We've caught up with everything we've been notified about, but if you certainly have any more, just send them direct to me and we'll get them out in a day or 2.
And are they specific suppliers, or is it just across the board?
There, we found a batch of, for example, a vendor that we deal with for lab purposes, that during the last quarter of last year, even though invoices were being submitted, they never received payment. So I've been working close with Dave Amador to try to get them expedited.
Okay.
But it's those unknown that now you're coming up and the vendor will say, oh, by the way, I still haven't gotten paid. So we, to avoid the shadow system, right, we're expecting for the systems to sort of, but it's hard to keep a log of what you expect to have been paid, especially when you submitted the invoices to accounts payable, and avoiding for the vendor sometimes to send to, to avoid duplications of invoices.
I think, in fairness, if they've submitted it before, perhaps they have, but if you have a legitimate PO that's open in the system, and even if they say that they've submitted the invoice previously, submit it again, get it to Dave, get it to Gary, and it'll be processed. And if it somehow was processed previously, it'll get kicked out as a duplicate. That's the fail-safe. There's no problem with doing that again, though.
Yeah, there's still going to be the cats and dogs around that we have to, for the bulk of it, where if you look at our statistics now, with the exception of, a few things here, we're talking about things that have come in the last few weeks. I think we get about, 7,000 a week?
2,000 a day.
I'm sorry, 2,000 a day.
Invoices.
We're up to
Little
2,000 a
under
day.
2,000 a day.
Yikes. So, okay. So, yeah, just keep, Dave's right, got to work with on that, but if we do see any pattern or any issues, I'd like to know about that. Other questions about procurement, expense? So like I said, one of the things that we need to do with our group, and they're starting this now, is to say what is normal operations, as opposed to what have been 7-day-a-week crisis mode. And that sounds trivial, or that sounds like it should be self-evident, but it isn't. So coming back and saying, well, who should be doing what, how they should be doing it, how the communications should go, that's all something that they need to take a step back and say, what's the best thing to do here, particularly in AP, but also in the procurement side of the world. Yeah.
Just as we head toward the end of the fiscal year, and this message will be put out in various forums, but since we're here, converted purchase orders, we've been saying this since prior to go live and throughout, they will not be honored after June 30th. So what I would implore all of you to do is if you have POs that you're working with that converted from RIAS or Banner, you could start this right now, and you still want to purchase from those suppliers and you're still utilizing those POs, you can get in a new requisition to get a successor PO in at any time, because after July 1st, those old POs are not going to be valid anymore.
Okay. If we have any other those questions, or come up with something else, just bring it up and we'll go through it. So next, resolving variances in the subledger. So here this is referring to the project ledger, the sponsored and non-sponsored projects. And if you've tracked with me on any of these, know that we've had discovered through input from the field, where transactions that were showing up on the grants or in the projects were not converting correctly into the general ledger. So that was what we called the subledger accounting rules, the set of issues there. And this has been a huge effort of discovering what were wrong with the rules, fixing that, and then putting forward the changes for transactions going back to going live. At the project level, in the project system, you can see your balances, and they reflect what has been processed, and they should be reflecting them in the right places. It's when they then process up to the general ledger, or summarize to the general ledger, that there have been the issues here. But unfortunately, that's where we had the major reports that you would use at that level. So those reports had to be pulled back, and the team is working on these elements, getting the reports accurate and stable, reconciling the data and all the transaction flow, and I mean literally all the transaction flow. You know, so we're looking at any transaction coming into the system and following it all the way through, validating that, and how to take care of the processes. We've got I was saying a small army, but now it's a mid-sized army from our various partners working on this. We had these 7 system accounting rule issues, and they had, that was what was causing the problem, as well as the reporting issues. This OTBI query is not easy, it's not perfect, it's not the way we want you to be able to look at data from grants, but it works at the moment, and until we get these other elements stable, that's the way that to look at balances you need to go to. There is instruction specifically on the Cornerstone site about the queries there. There was communication out about this. If you haven't used those, if you need to use those have background on how to do so. We're working very quickly to get both the transactions updated and the reports tested and back into production, so that that'll work. But it's taking a lot of time, a lot more time than anybody wanted it to do. So on some of the specifics, so as far as one of the variance issues was the backlog of invoices. So by the end of this month, well, by now really, everything except the few that we haven't reconciled, all the emergency payments, the resolving the final ones, the vast majority of these have been posted. So they're there now. Data converted, this really has to do with RBHS grants, where certain data did not come from Banner perfectly. It had some truncation, had some, I don't know, rounding errors, if you will, almost. And those have been all identified, and transactions are going to go in to fix those expenses and budgets and revenues on those. The vast majority of those are somewhere in the neighborhood of $50 or less per account, and a lot of the accounts are not necessarily active ones, but this is a big deal for anybody who has an RBHS grant, because it's not starting with a good opening balance. So this one is a huge priority, and we have a team that is working on the specific transactions to clean it up and tie it down and get it fixed. This was one where the conversion from Banner just did not go right. We had, well, this doesn't have the, okay. Payroll transactions dated after the grant end date. So we've had problems with the conversion of end dates, and again, that was just from Banner, right? Mostly. A few from Rio. A few stragglers. Sorry, allergies are making my throat real dry. I got getting something to drink in it. So these end dates were shutting off transactions, and there was not an easy way to fix this. We've been doing a massive upload, and I think I have detail on it in a few minutes here. There's detail on this one, right? In a minute. Yeah, I'll show you that in a second then. Change in source of funds, I've also got something to go over with that, and I'll come to that in a few minutes. And then requisition showing as duplicate commitments. There was a process to eliminate these duplicate commitments, and it ran on the 6th and then of April, and canceling open requisitions created prior to that, these duplicates, right? So that should be helping on some of the commitment balances.
That's just about complete, that last one.
Yeah, talk into the mic.
Sure. The cancellation of the duplicate commitments is complete as of last night. We're just going to spot check a couple things this afternoon
As of last
and then
night.
communicate it.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, we'll get a communication out on that. And that was as a result of, how we had to bypass to get payments made. So they didn't relieve the commitments, get rid of those. Okay, actions units can take around these variances. So one of the issues had to do with incorrect default chart of accounts segments for expense reports. So that was one of the problems, okay? And that is getting corrected, or it's gotten corrected. Is this one that's gotten corrected already, or going forward, or not quite yet?
I think it's being worked on.
It's being worked on, okay. So the trick here is overriding the default values and putting in the correct ones. All right, which is not what we would normally want to do, but what we can do in the meantime until the fix is in place. Data that converted incorrectly, that gives you the information if the UDO is incorrect, what to do. If you have the converted balance not being corrected, really is to contact UCO and go through controller's office, and they'll help you through that process. This is not for the grants that I was referring to earlier. Those are going to be handled centrally through a major load. And this is typically around the mapping, again. Internal purchase order credits, if you have IPOs, there's been instruction out on that. And then finally, change in source of funds, the whole salary redistribution piece. And we have more details here in a minute on that. So what's going on now with the controller's office? We probably haven't had new information on this. An issue regarding that's been pretty random, finding some payroll transactions that haven't been posting, and I don't know if we've gotten to understand today. It's been fast moving.
Right there.
And it hasn't happened on every payroll, so this was just discovered. Tom, you have some new information on that, or current information?
Yeah, so for example, for the March 24th payroll, we found about 900 rows that weren't processed. So we're getting to the bottom of that. I mean, in total, there was 12,000 rows. So we're not talking about a lot, but, in this case, any omission.
Everyone matters.
Yeah, any omission is a big deal. So we're treating it as such, and it seems to be an Oracle issue, so we're working closely with the software vendor to get the problem resolved. It's still pretty early in the analysis.
Because another payroll had none, right?
The most recent payroll, the May 5th payroll, had 0 problems. But the one that we were analyzing was the March 24th payroll. We found, like I said, we found 900 problems of about 12,000 rows that had issues. And like I said, we are very close to pinpointing the problem, and we logged the problem with Oracle, and we should have some answers in terms of the root cause and the magnitude in the next couple days.
Yeah, and we'll be getting any of the corrections in.
Yeah, and we actually built a method to correct everything. So the method of correction is actually, we have a good handle on that. So we're building up all the data to make all the corrections.
Okay. I want to stop there if anybody has questions about that one, because that's a new one that just came out. Again, it's been pretty random.
It is very random, that one, yeah.
Okay, reconciling converted balances for sponsored projects. I referred to this before. That was we'll be doing a massive update of the expenses, budgets, and revenues. This is RBHS banner converted data that has that, where there were truncations and things that got missed in the conversion. Targeting the end of this month for finishing that. April 17 close is scheduled for May 18th. We extended that to be able to get a lot of these transaction fixes in, and so that they would be as caught up as we can. We're starting the processes here for year-end and for the year-end audit and the federal audit. And as I mentioned before, we'll be sending out information from the coordinated between Controller's Office and Procurement for year-end instruction. I emphasize again that the more that we can get into AP, the earlier for payments, the better, so that we don't get stuck in a backlog there and have any issues around it. So this refers back to the grant contract, the end date issue. So rather than, there were two fixes here. One, to provide information that's readily available. We created a new field that shows the true grant end date, because the other field, it controls transactions, which is typically the regular end date plus 90 days. So it allows the 90 days to clean up the account, but then you get to day 91 and it cuts off. So that doesn't help when you're looking for what is my true end date. So creating a new field. These have been, I think they're almost done? Two-thirds of the way fixed.
Right. Yeah, so two-thirds are corrected in production, and then the last third we're planning to get in by the end of the week.
And then any of the transactions that have been backlogged from that will then start flowing through. Okay, they've been held and then they'll in suspense and will start to flow through. So if all goes well, for the closing of April, they'll be in these backlog transactions. Yes.
What report would these be showing up on?
Which
End
transac-
dates?
The end dates? Which report is the end dates on?
So what you'll see, for the most part, what you'll see is payroll transactions that have been released on your project. So if you look at any of the project reports, like in the 505, you'll see those. No?
Okay, my 505 doesn't have end dates when
Oh,
I'm going
what report will
into.
you see the actual end date
Yeah,
in? Oh, I'm
yeah.
sorry.
We'll actually put out guidance so where you can see it. We'll put out guidance that I'll show you the screenshot of where to see it in Oracle. And then what we'll also do is some of our reports that we maybe would have to point to that
Thank you.
DFF to see it.
Adding it to the report.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I recommend you to the GCA website. There is a lot of work going on in grant and contract accounting, and we're brought in folks to help fix the things and also to help Angelo with just dealing with the backlog and the processes and so on. It's a big deal to get through here, but we're really pushing through. This end date thing has been the biggest problem there, along with the conversion from the banner data. And then once those opening balances are good, then they can start doing billings and reconciliations against those. But again, those are largely out of banner. There are a few RIOS things that converted, but not, or had conversion issues, but not for that reason, for other reasons. And those are being addressed as well. Grant questions? This is this is where we do not have the pretty easy report yet. And I go back to the OTBI queries, which are they're not easy, but you can get the data from them. And we're working on those final issues with the comprehensive report, but we're going to test the hell out of it before it goes out to anybody this time. So we're going to beat it up or even try it out with some units to make sure that they can use it right and it ties back to these queries before we put it out in general release. I don't want any more instances where we have to pull back a report because it didn't work in some circumstance. So, anything else on reports, guys? Okay. So I'm going to pause here for general questions about the financial system or that. Otherwise, I'm going to actually talk forward after this in terms of what's going on in Phase 2. So, but I don't want to leave Phase 1 until we've addressed everybody's questions or issues. Yes? Oh, get the mic, please.
I know earlier there were a lot of shipping and handling charges that were charged to the controller's office.
Yes.
How are you guys going to deal with that, or in terms of charging them to the accounts that they actually belong to?
We put together a journal entry to reclassify those. I believe, I believe that'll be in for April.
When should we expect that to hit?
For
our-
the
The
April
month of
close.
April. In the April close.
In the April close, which will be next week.
If there are any charges against closed activities, we're dealing with that centrally. Right here. please. So
Hi,
that won't be
we-
your issue.
We have a number of journal entries that have gone missing that kind of went into space, and
Okay.
we're not sure who to report that to or how to move forward with them.
Well, at least 2 or 3 people in this room. You can report those too. What kinds of journal entries were they?
They're some are split in transfers that they're like FedEx charges, and then there's also ones that are specific things that we were trying to move from a
Okay.
grant. And there's no rhyme or reason to it. It just sometimes happens. We've tried to
And
do
they were
metrics
entered
on-
online, and these were entered online?
Correct.
Okay. Can we, who wants to pick up that one so we can track it down?
We need to send them to. I would suggest contacting the controller's office, either through the finance website, the finance email address, or you can call or contact Debbie Vassallo, and her area will address this.
And
We kind of need specifics on details of
Yeah.
what the entries are and stuff to look into them.
because we'd also like to know why they went, where they went, and
'Cause
why.
we would just need the backup to, we would need the
This is the
details
con-
so that we can research it.
Right, for part of it, we figured out what the problem is. Sometimes it's a system, for part of it.
For part of it, it's a system issue where once I click on the email, occasionally, and there's no rhyme or reason to it, it doesn't show up in the system the same way it shows up in the email. And we figured out that those are the ones for a certain specific area of the journal entries, that those are the ones that vanish and go into space and disappear. So I have examples of those, and there's nothing we can do.
Are you using a spreadsheet template?
No.
No, it's through the actual system. Okay, we have
Okay,
to
we
look
need
into
to,
that.
Sure.
we're going to get some of these and do a root cause on them. Okay. Thank you. See, it's by getting the information like that that we can track something down. That is really important. And see if this is a more systemic issue or if there's just something off about it, or if we need to put out some guidance about something else. Okay, so we can come back to anything. I just wanted to talk about Phase 2. Phase 2 is focused on human resources and student experience. So as far as human resources are concerned, human resources and payroll, we've commenced the business process re-engineering and redesign and organizational review. It has just gotten started. There are just some work teams going on existing business processes now. So in very general terms, what does this mean? This means we got to figure out what should be done where and when, by whom. We have a very distributed system that goes, and transactions go from the departments to sometimes chancellor units to central and back again, and really looking at what's the best process for that, for all pieces, whether it be for hiring, whether it be for payroll activity, whatever it might be, finding the best way of doing that and organizing it is the goal here. So we're going to spend as much time as we need to getting that understood before we touch the software. The software will come up when it comes up, and it will be basically taking the existing PeopleSoft system, but getting into the modern version. Anything we need, questions about that? If you haven't been involved in this yet, I think by the time we get around, everybody will have an opportunity to hear and to be part of this effort. It's really important from the standpoint of service to the departments and service to employees. You know, so, and it's a concerted effort between human resources and payroll services. Questions on that? The other, whoops, won't go there. The other project that's continuing is the Student Experience Improvement Initiative, SEII. And that is looking at this stage, enrollment management, financial aid, student accounts, and registrar functions, as well as how services are conveyed to students. So it is looking at those functions and where do the processes need to be improved, where does the organization need to be improved, where do just flat out orientation of them need to be improved. And we're also looking at the concepts of one-stop shopping for students, physical locations where there are cross-trained individuals who can help in those transactions, as well as improving the IT infrastructure. This is probably the most complex piece of all these efforts that we've had to do here, and not just because, you know, of the conversion between UMD&J systems, but because Rutgers has had such an old system and disjointed processes in this area. We are teams that you would think would be interacting with one another may not have been, and now they are. And how do we make that really work well? So this one it's not up there, but it's a major effort in regards to the President's strategic goal in terms of improving the student experience. Arguably, our student information systems were the ones that needed attention first, but all this work needs to happen before we want to touch them, so that we really design them correctly. And sometime later this year, we'll actually pick the system. We haven't even bothered to pick it yet because we have so much work to do. Anything that should add to that, Needy? So the physical one-stop shops are getting discussed at each of the campuses, whether it be New Brunswick, Newark, Camden, or RBHS Newark. And then also questions around New Brunswick because it's so big of how we deal with the fact that it's so big, including the RBHS functions here. So that's the other part of Phase 2. Phase 3 will be the implementation of that student information system. And I'm not even predicting when we'll do that yet, until we get some more of this work done. Just a little bit about financial planning. I mean, if you're involved in budgets, you're either done or scrambling, or you're not here because you're working on them to get them in for the cutoff. But I wanted to just give everybody a little feel for what is it that the Rutgers budget looks like. We put these together for the open hearing on tuition, fees, room and board, and thought they were interesting to show to anybody who wanted to know a little bit more about what was going on with our budget overall. So it's almost $4 billion, which is a striking number. And that's, if you break that down further, it's New Brunswick and RBHS are about 80% of that, and then Camden and Newark split up the rest of it. 50% of our revenues come from tuition fees and state appropriations, including fringe benefits. Now, if you'd gone back 10 years ago, this piece of the pie would be much bigger, and this piece of the pie would be much smaller. And that's because our appropriations have both gone down or been held flat for so long that the compensation has been in tuition and fees. But it's also been because we've added students, net students. Grants and contracts, 15%. Patient care, which wasn't in the old Rutgers, of course, 18% and growing. Auxiliary enterprises is housing and dining primarily, so you kind of have to add that piece to that piece. Federal and state student aid, direct contributions in. Gifts and endowment, only 2%, which is an extraordinarily small number for a 250-year-old institution. Small percentage. An important one, but a small one. And then other, 3%. So what are the things that are going on in terms of the revenue sources? Tuition fees, other charges, well, pressure on affordability and access is a critical piece, especially something the President and the Chancellors have been really pressing on. And then the concern over changes to federal funding, especially around student aid. Some of the things that were recommended in the Trump so-called skinny budget would have had huge impacts on some of our key financial aid programs. They did not get into the continuing resolution that goes through the end of this federal fiscal year, but we don't know what's going to come out of the next one. What did happen that was nice to see is that Pell Grants got extended to include the summer too, which was something that had been cut out. But that's something that we're worried about, watching carefully. State appropriations have been flat or gone down since I've gotten here, gone down a little bit, and so therefore not keeping up with inflation in any sense. So we're really taking about a 2% hit every year on that, in that respect, and that's not going to change. Patient care, 18% and growing, but whatever might happen at federal legislation in terms of health care could have a serious impact on that, especially Medicaid. And grants and contracts, again, there have been some things floating around about cutting research either overall or in specific categories. That did not happen in the current fiscal year through the continuing resolution. In fact, NIH got more money, but we don't know what's going to happen, and there's real big pressure to push on that. Expenses, so salary and wages and fringe benefits make up 65%. By the way, all these slides will be on my website later today. They are now? Later today. Salary and wages and fringe benefits, 65%. Not unexpected. Now, that's the bulk of what we do. Scholarships and fellowships, 8. Services, supplies, utilities, maintenance, debt service, other. Very small piece that's left, and then 35%. And what are the things going on there? Salary and wages, making up the 50%. We have negotiated mandatory annual salary increases that are in those labor agreements. On the fringe benefits side, this is determined by the state. We don't run our own fringe benefit programs. These have gone up. If you have grants and such, you know that this rate has gone up extraordinarily high in the last year or so because of costs. Yes, it has to do with the pension payments at the state level. It has more to do with our health care plan and the costs associated with our state employee benefit plan for health care. So that is something we're really worried about because our fringe benefit rate being over 50% makes it significantly higher than other higher education institutions that are in the 30s or even the 20s. And that can be a competitive issue. It's also an issue as we go through in terms of adding positions beyond the ones that the state pays for now, which are all full. So every new position, even every net new position in the university has fringe benefit reimbursement coming along with it. Financial aid is critical for access and affordability through the Rutgers institutional aid. We also track very carefully what's going on at the state in the tuition aid grant program, as well as Pell and others for federal. I was heartened to see that the governor's budget recommended almost a 3.9% increase in TAG funding for students in the upcoming budget. If that gets through the legislature, that'll be good, because that'll go to our students who need it. And then everything else, 20%, that's where we have to look for efficiencies and cost control and everything else that goes along. We have some preliminary budget assumptions. You've all been involved, or many of you have been involved in doing budgets lately. We're at the point now of having to put them all together and see what we have, but certainly targeting tuition increase below 2%. Now, it's all depending on what the state does with our appropriation, and we don't really know that until the end of June. But affordability is a critical piece there, and keeping that as low as possible. I just mentioned the TAG program. The salary increases are in there, and what we're worried about right here is that the recommended budget shows fringe benefit costs going up, but we don't know how that'll translate into the rate that we have to pay, or we have to reimburse back. So we don't know on that one, and I'm worried about that one, because it's already extraordinarily high. So training, as we start to work our way out of crisis mode, and I'm confident we will, we need to get back to concerted training and retraining, and other workshops that allow for everyone to get another look at how best to do things, and to share information, share best practices about that. So these are ones that are available and coming up. Chart of accounts overview, how to use the reporting tools, how to use Excel tools, advanced project adjustments, grant and contract accounting. So these are things that we will, as go through the summer, add to. We're also, for any of these classes, they're being recorded and posted so that they can be played back for reference. So go to the Cornerstone website to look for that. We are also looking at what I would call, when we get into this bit, we're going to have these via Skype, so you can do them from your desk. And depending on how these go, we're going to just continue to repeat them and do some field training too. I think especially as we get more capacity to be able to go out and do that. I highly recommend these. And the Skype one, you don't have to worry about whether there's a chair for you or not in the room there. What's the survey? You slipped this one in on me. Stephanie's great. We're going to conduct a survey, and we really do want the real feedback here. We have a very dedicated group of people, and the whole goal here is to make this thing really work. And we want to know where we have made mistakes. I know a lot of those, and we want to know where we can get your suggestions for how to do things better. So email the week of May 22nd. I know people hate to do surveys. I implore upon you to do this survey, because we want as much feedback as we can possibly get. And we want ideas. We have opportunities to work with the vendor to change things. It's not an easy process, it's not an overnight process, but we also have other institutions that we can partner with and say, hey, Vanderbilt and Rutgers want to do this. Can you change the screen? Can you change this process? Can you make the expense form more straightforward, whatever it might be? And those are the things that we need input on. So please pay attention to this and fill it out when it comes through. for you. And then, as always, please look to the Cornerstone website. We worry about sending out too much information because people get deadened to reading it, and that's not good, but, you know, rather, other than calling you up, one of you up, which is a thought, we'll just get a telephone tree and call everybody. You know, that's not, this is still the best place to go. Highly recommend the RAIN listserv if you're dealing with grants and contracts and not on it yet. Highly recommend going to the RAIN meetings when they're held, because that's really where problems get solved. So, questions, ideas, suggestions, thoughts? Allergy medicine? It's a bad day. Allergies. Okay, wow. Anybody on the web? Okay. Yes, sir. Wait, let me get the mic so that the people on the web can hear you. And we're recording this.
Yep, thank you. So, Mike, great job. As you mentioned, this is being streamed, so I'm just curious what portion of the audience is here in person versus, you know, online? Just
You said
rough
40
numbers.
online? 60. 60? I continue to be amazed that people want to watch me from their desktop. Just makes no sense to me. Of course, they're not watching me. They're, you know what? Actually, they aren't watching me. They're watching that, right? So that's good. Yeah, this is recorded and posted, both what we do here, and then, of course, the slides will be posted. And you can go back to any of the old ones, too. They're all available on both the finance website and the Cornerstone website. And if you have a question, suggestion, feedback, send them to this. There is a person who actually goes through every one of those emails. She's sitting over there. And she actually does something with each one of them. It needs to get done, sitting right over there. So it is not a dead letter box. Highly recommend and ask you to send things to that as you have them. All right, we'll stick around. Anybody wants to do something offline? Those of you on the web, thank you. And we'll be back. Well, where am I next month? Newark. Okay. Thanks, everyone.